Hi, welcome to Sacred Intelligence TV. As always, we're glad that you decided to join us today. Glossophobia is the fear of public speaking, and is something that's quite common. It can range from being afraid to raise your hand in the classroom, to speaking at your office for a presentation, to even speaking in social settings. But today, we have an expert here who's going to talk with us about how do you overcome your fear of public speaking. A few things that happens to people when they are very, very afraid of speaking publicly is that sometimes they'll begin to experience some physical symptoms, dry mouth, heart palpitations, sweaty palms, and the like. You know, I'm sure you've been there before, as all of us have been there. So we want to talk about how do we get to a place where we can overcome our fears, or at least overcome them enough so that we can get up and we can give a fantastic presentation and then move beyond that fear that we have. So today I'm joined, I'm having a moment here. Today I am joined, of course, by my co-host Susan Bainbridge, and I'm also joined by Leslie Karen Hammond. Leslie Karen Hammond is a woman who is a phenomenal woman who was honored in 2012 as a Woman of Fire by the Commercial Record Leader. She's an award-winning speaker and the founder of Confident Speaker Series. She's an author whose third book is expected to come out by the end of the summer. It's called Keep It Real: Why We're Afraid to Speak Up and What to Do About It. Leslie Karen Hammond is also a medicine woman, and what she does is that she uses the techniques as a medicine woman of the indigenous traditions to turn public speaking into something that's fun, something that you don't have to worry about being so afraid of, but also use it as a healing experience. Because we know that oftentimes the reasons why we're afraid to speak is because we have these messages that are going on in our head about we're not good enough to get out and speak in front of other people, or maybe you're dumb, maybe you're stupid. Whatever those messages are that we carry in our heads, Leslie has found an exciting way of helping you to get past those things. So she's here today, and we're so excited to have her to talk to us about how do you overcome your fears. Now, Leslie has done quite a number of things that I personally would be afraid of, but she wasn't. She's jumped out of planes before, she's walked on hot coals, and she's also eaten fire. Now, most of us would be afraid of that. And it's not so much about the fear, but it's about stepping outside of your comfort zone, stepping outside of the boundaries to say, I'm going to do something that I've never done before. And public speaking can often be one of those things to hold us back, that keeps us inside of the box. So I'm delighted today that Leslie has decided to join us so that we can go that next step and be the best person that we can be and live to our fullest potential, whether it's in a social situation or whether we're doing a presentation for a job. So Leslie, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, ladies. It's great to be here.
And of course, Susan, we're always excited to be working together with our guests. So Leslie, we just want to jump right into your experiences of just learning to be the confident speaking expert, which is what you're known as. And I know that that didn't happen overnight, because in reading your bio, I know that you were part of Toastmasters, yay, Toastmasters, since I was in it years ago as well. And so can you talk to us a little bit about your journey for becoming the confident speaking expert?
Oh yeah, let's get right into that.
Yes, let's get right into it, because I want to hear all about the faux pas that you probably made, and also just some of the successes, because I think what often happens is that people can look at where you are now and think, oh no, she never had problems with that, or
clearly she's a natural.
Exactly. So talk to us a little bit about how you got to be in this place of being the confident speaking expert.
Well, it was a constant strive to always want to do better. And when I came to a point where I realized that my voice was worth hearing, what I had to say was important, it completely changed the dynamic, because everyone that goes through this, fear of speaking starts off in a place where they don't believe they ought to be heard. Whether it's they don't feel they deserve to be heard, or whether they bring all kinds of baggage you know, from every experience they've ever had where someone's told them to be quiet, or come from the generation of, you know, children were meant to be seen and not heard.
Right.
I mean, that's a huge one. Or every time someone was told, well, you don't know what you're talking about. So there were a lot of experiences that I had in those very realms that contributed slowly but surely to this lack of confidence, and, you know, stick a marriage in there that wasn't really healthy. And it all contributed to me getting to this point where I felt small. And it was horrible. It was extremely uncomfortable, and it attributes to the way we move through the world. And when we feel that way, you know, it starts off by a process of thinking, but not only do we think it, we feel it. And the thing that most people don't understand is how what we feel conveys everywhere. It's like this bubble that's around us. So everybody knows what it's like when you walk into a room and there's someone in there that it's almost like this, you know, the clouds part and the sun comes down, you know, on top of them, and you think, oh, I really need to meet that person. Who is that? And then by the same token, you walk into a room when somebody's having a bad day and they got a, you know, huge chip on their shoulder, you feel that too. So the one thing that most people don't equate to public speaking is the feeling part of it. So it's all about being empowered and feeling that you have the right to say what you're going to say, that other people deserve to hear you. So there's a whole lot that gets brought to the table, but there was a time when I had a chance to speak. You know, this is the part about, well, were you always like this? And I made small talk before this presentation. This was in a previous career life, and I was, in fact, I was at the Dow chemical plant. I used to work there years and years and years ago for a subcontractor. And I was about to make an introduction of someone, and just to make small talk, because I didn't know a lot of the people there, everyone I talked to, I said, oh, you know, I'm probably going to get all choked up. I'm probably going to forget my lines, and just thinking I was making small talk. And in the process of doing that, I planted the seed.
That's exactly
that's
right.
what was going to happen. And son of a gun, I got up on that stage, and it was the
and
deer
in
in the headlights.
I think what's really interesting about that, the work that we do, we are constantly telling people that they have to imagine themselves in whatever situation that they want to be in, and they have to speak it. We often do mirror exercises where we're asking people to do that. And even though we're not exactly talking about how powerful words are, they are very, very powerful. What you speak, you end up thinking and you end up behaving in that way. Because when you began to talk, I was thinking about how when people say the children are to be seen and not heard, you know, we've all heard that term, but you really don't know how you're shaping an individual's way of thinking, because some of them never grow out of it. But how did you overcome that experience when you got up there and you got choked for a minute?
I knew that I wasn't going to drop dead. Good start. I knew I'd survive. Yeah. No, I looked out into the audience for friendly faces. And I smiled. One of the most important things that people can do is to smile. It sounds so simple, but it's so incredibly powerful. And it just gives you an opportunity to radiate and for people to see the joy that's in you and the wonderful person that you are. So,
yeah, I think that's really interesting, because you really can't get caught up in how people are looking at you when they're speaking to you, because their minds could be on something else, and it has nothing to do with whether you're a great speaker or not. You just have to go out and do the very best that you can do. So tell us more, though, about the journey, because you've had other careers, as you just said. So what about public speaking? You know, why public speaking as opposed to anything else that you've done? Because you've done some phenomenal work in other areas.
Well, public speaking is, whether you do it as a profession or whether it's a networking vehicle that you use. I mean, speaking is something that impacts absolutely every area of our life, whether it's communicating with your children or your spouse, other family members, friends, associates. It's absolutely critical to be able to stand in your own presence and be comfortable and to confidently communicate. And there had been so much pain that I had seen over the years from women and men alike that didn't feel they deserved the right to speak up. And therefore, through that result of being quiet, not only could you see their pain, but you could feel it. And when you think about all the things that have come to be in the world because people haven't spoken up. And what will happen is when someone is suppressed and they don't speak out, they bury that, they tuck it in, they tuck it in, they tuck it in, and then all of a sudden it's like Mount St. Helens erupting when the last thing is there's no more room to tuck one more thing
no.
in.
Before Mount St. Helen, though, comes, so that's aggressive. But before that comes passive aggressive. So we might be passive for a little while, but you're right. You start stuffing that stuff, and it's going to start seeping out in rolled eyes and slammed doors, and you may not even be in contact with that at that point.
I think there are some other, we have all these different ways that it comes out, because ultimately it ends up in being incredibly anxious and also depressed in a lot of cases when people don't speak out. And so, we do a lot of work with people around getting past anxieties, fears, and depression. But what you're doing when you're working with people with speaking, you refer to it as helping other people to heal. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about it, because, obviously as a therapist, we have a way that we would work with someone in terms of healing around anxieties and fears. But how do you help people heal, and what are some of the things that you help them heal from? I know fear is one of them, but you're kind of talking about some other things as you're going to.
Well, there's feelings of worthiness. That's one of the biggest ones. I mean, that's epidemic today in society. So many people, I mean, and I've been there myself. I understand what it's like to not feel worthy and to put up with lots of things. So the focus where I go after is more the feeling component of it, because people, and self included, have gotten to the point where you put up a wall.
Yes.
It's nice and safe behind this wall. I mean, there's times in my life when I've gotten to be an expert mason.
Oh, yeah.
My wall was pretty high and pretty deep, and there was just no getting through it. So to get someone to feel comfortable with speaking, it really takes some digging into the things that they're good at, to the successes that they've had in their lives, regardless of what someone else's opinion was on that, but to really get into all of the things that they've succeeded at, all of their, their attagirls or their attaboys. Because a lot of times for really successful people, we have a success and then, okay, what's next? What's next? All right, I've got this on my schedule, I need to do this and do this, so we don't take time to celebrate. And before
Because it's never good enough.
Well,
even if they're climbing, they feel like, yeah, but
that's
I could have
only
done
one
better.
step.
Right, I could have done better.
And now I need to focus on the next step.
Well, and that's a terrific segue into the inner critic. I mean, earlier you were talking about the imagination, and the imagination, that's a two-way street. And we tend to go more towards the negative places with our imagination than we do with the positive. How that ever happened, I have no idea.
Oh, I can tell you.
Well, I don't know who started it. I'd love to know.
There's actually been recent research on that.
Ah, oh, really?
Yes, the whole idea that we've evolved this way because our very, very distant ancestors would have these two opposing drives, the approach drive and the avoidance or retreat drive. And that if the approach drive was stronger than the retreat drive, then seeing a lovely bush over there, that person might think, oh, that might have yummy berries on it. I'm going to go over and have a handful. But then the retreat drive kicks in and says, ooh, but there also might be a saber-toothed tiger hiding behind that bush, and I might get eaten alive. And of course, our biologically survival of the species, Mother Nature put that negative bias on purpose. Mother Nature or whoever has created us or whatever has created us or brought us here as a form of protection.
Well, if creatures can evolve from the sea to the land,
yeah,
then surely
then we should be able to overcome that negative bias,
that's right?
One would think.
I mean, it's not the kind of thing that happens overnight, because so many people, they're like, oh, fix me, give me a pill. and I'll be on my way. But this is something that, I mean, it takes a very serious commitment. You don't just dabble lightly in these fields, and it's a practice. I mean, just like yoga or meditation, it's a practice. There's a reason that word is put into place, because it requires your constant attention.
Well, I think that that's one of the things that's hard about therapy. We can see people for a year, and sometimes there's a place that they're just stuck, that they will not move past, because it takes work to change all of these things. And so when you're talking about changing someone's self-worth, that takes an incredibly long time.
Well, and it's frightening as all get out, too, because it's familiar, which I'm sure that you see all the time as well, is that, you know, people feel a safety in the familiar. The unknown is that, well, it's just that. It's the unknown, and good, bad, or indifferent, whatever happens in this place of the unknown, still it's just that. The fact it's unknown it can be more than overwhelming for some people, because it's just far too risky. They're happy and they're comfortable in this nice little world that they've created, and even though there may be unpleasantries in there, at least they know it. So it's more of keeping the enemy close by, so that you can have a little bit more control.
So tell us a little bit about your experience as a medicine woman. Tell us a bit how you use the traditions of the indigenous people. How do you use that to help folk to really tap into their inner strength and become an expert speaker? And really, you know, we're talking about public speaking, but we're talking about so much more than that. So can you speak a little bit about that? And maybe just to back up a bit, because some people may not know what a medicine woman is, and I want to just have clear language so that our viewers
well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. To sum it up, if you could imagine a person that can hold what I like to refer to as holding space. Within this space, you would feel the comfort of being held by your favorite aunt or your mother or your grandmother. It would be this place of safety where you can be who you are and anything is possible. So I hold this kind of space for people, and when they're within this space, it gives them an opportunity to tap back into the most purest form of themselves. The form before there was any drama, there was any trauma, almost as though we go back to the purest essence of before birth. It's a taste
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
It's a taste of infinity, of where there are no limitations. I mean, it's a place of limitlessness. So it gives them a taste of what that is, and that unconditional acceptance. So it's holding space for people to grow and to do the work they do. And there's a profound reverence for everything in life, whether it's the universe, it's the sun, it's the moon, it's the earth, it's the stones, it's the animals. I mean, everything has a vibration, everything has a way of contributing, and everything ultimately has a message for us in one form or another. It's a matter of the ability to tune in and the recognition that one's not crazy. Because a lot of times people will think, you know, just for example, if you go for a walk on a beach and you see a beautiful shell or you see a stone that speaks to you, there's a specific reason for that. You may not need to know what it is, but there's something about that that appeals to you. And stones, in fact, are one of the vehicles I use so many times in all kinds of work, because a stone or a crystal, for example, can be a vessel to hold very powerful, positive things. And then that would be something that you can carry with you all the time.
So you're using these techniques to really kind of help you get that person in a place of clarity and strength, really, and empowerment.
Yes.
So that you then do the work that you need to do with getting them
correct
into speaking.
One way I like to refer to it on occasion is I'm a window washer. So you come into the world and you have completely clean windows. And then as time progresses, the windows get a little dirty and they need to get cleaned. So I help clean the windows, and it provides clarity, and it's like a breath of fresh air when you haven't taken a deep breath in decades.
That's really nice. I like that. I like that. So, you know, one of the things when you and I were talking about your experiences as a medicine woman, you also mentioned to me about always being authentic and having a heart of service. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that really chokes people up when they get on stage to speak is they put all the focus on them. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm going to do this wrong, I'm going to do that wrong, I didn't do this, I don't have that. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. And the key to making that disappear and just having it not be, have it be a non-issue is knowing that when you're standing in front of a group of people, you're there because you have something insightful to share with them. They are there because they know they are going to walk away with something useful for them. So when you're able to come from a heart of service, you know that you are there to serve. You make it about the audience. You take all of the focus off of you, and then suddenly, I mean, it's just like women, for example, we're always there to nurture others and to, to serve and to help. And in doing so, we take the focus off of us. I mean, sometimes to the extreme where we stop taking care of ourselves. I mean, there's all kinds of examples. So just to take a small component of that and then apply that to standing in front of an audience and coming from a place of service. You are here to share your expertise, your wisdom, your insight with people. And knowing that they're hungry or they're thirsty and they need what you have.
I think that's so crucial because I can think of a couple of experiences where, for me, when I've spoken before like really large groups and thinking about what I was speaking about, when you walk into that room, always thinking of yourself as the expert because that's why people want to hear you, is because you're the expert in the area. And going in with that in mind and being okay to say, if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, I'll get back to you about that. Even though you're the expert, you don't have to know everything.
Exactly.
But always keeping that in your mind. But I love what you're saying about, too, it's not really about you. I had an incident, and this is just thinking about emotionally. I remember when I pastored a church, and I was going to be leaving that church. And it was probably 2 Sundays before my last service, and I felt myself getting really emotional. Now, the pastor just really can't break down in service. That just wouldn't be good. And I thought, well, how will I get through my sermon? But what occurred to me was that it really isn't about you. This isn't about you at all. The work that you've done here is about a greater mission and goal, and it's about a greater power than you. And so someone else will come along to fill your shoes with that. You've done what you were called to do. It's not about you. And the minute I did that, it was good. And it's not to say that I still didn't have compassion and empathy and cared about, leaving, but it just took the pressure off in a completely different way. So I like that idea of it's really not about you. And if you can do that, it helps you.
And the beautiful part of that is when one comes into this point of acceptance that that is the case, and then you add the component of non-attachment to outcome, because people that are there will get what they're supposed to get. It may not occur to them that afternoon, it may take a day, it may take a week, a month, a year, but being not attached to the outcome opens up space and gives freedom for people to receive what they need. It's not about, well, I feel this person should have gotten this or they were supposed to get this. We never know what the people in the audience are going through. You mentioned that before. We have no control over what they're thinking, over what they're feeling, over their actions.
And sometimes it's so funny because they'll come up and say, oh, because you said such and such and such, and you're going, well, that wasn't even one of my more salient points. But it was what was important to them. I wonder, though, could you tell us what are some of the biggest challenges that you see when working with people, with helping them to become confident speakers? What are some of the things that just get in the way? I mean, I know feeling unworthy and things like that we can talk about, but does anything come to mind about challenges?
Well, the expert thing has to be one of the biggest hurdles because people have this fear of taking ownership of being an expert. And it doesn't matter what you do, the perspective that you bring, the experiences that you've had in relation to this topic are yours and yours alone. No one else sees it the way you do. So if nothing else, that makes you an expert because of what you bring to the table. Absolutely. And another thing is that people always get wrapped up about freezing up or forgetting what they're going to have to say. And I've heard stories of people, and this probably happens, to you as well, when it's time to give a service, and perhaps you have these grand ideas of what it is that needs to come out at that particular time, and so maybe you write a bunch of things down, but then all of a sudden you get up to the lectern, and that's not what they have in mind.
Right.
And it changes. So for people to know their material, to be confident enough that they know it in their bones, that within every ounce of their being, this material resides, so that when they walk up on any stage or in any speaking situation, that what needs to come out will.
I think what's crucial about this, and what Susan and I have talked a lot about on this show, is really about being in touch with that inner being and that inner part of you. And when you are connected with that, if you have to change what you're going to say in that moment, you don't have to be wedded to what's on your paper, your iPad, because what needs to be said is just absolutely going to come out. And it ultimately is consistent with whatever you've been thinking about anyway. And sometimes you'll have an experience where it's put on your spirit to say one thing, and you'll say, I'm not going to say that. I think it would be better if I say X, Y, and Z. No, it's probably better if you just tap into that.
Exactly.
So that's it. That's really good what you're saying about.
Well, what's even funnier about that is when you do intuit and you pay attention and you say what it is they're guiding you to say, and then someone says, "Can you repeat that?" What did I say?
So you can say, so what part of that did you want me to repeat? What was it that? And then you just say it in a different way. But yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. So I'm glad that you've talked to us a little bit about some of your experiences. But I want to, in the second part of the show, to really kind of get into what are some of the things that we can do about fear. Let's talk about what are some of the nitty-gritty things we can do, and then I'd like you very much to go into one of the programs that you have where you work with people around it. But what are just some basic sort of things that we can do to just get over this fear of speaking in public? And I really do want to say speaking in public, because I know from working with people in my practice that even if people had to walk in here right now, there are certain people who couldn't come in and introduce themselves. So what advice do you have for people?
And look at that. It's just a smile. It's not imagine your audience in their underwear.
Yeah, that could get you into trouble.
Start giggling, doing a very serious point that you're trying to make.
Exactly. Well, smiling, you can never go wrong with smiling. And depending on who your audience is, you gauge the level of smile that you offer. But smiling is always so important. And one really simple thing that people can do, if you know you're going to be speaking and you have, even if it's just a minute or two right before you go on, and there's a hallway or another room that you can go into, stand there and, do a little power pose.
Yeah. Strike a Wonder Woman pose.
That's right.
And there's research on that as well that supports that. Talking about, for instance, if we're about to go into a job interview and you know that you're about to be evaluated, that people are going to be judging you. There's no getting around that when you're going to a job interview. And that what we normally do is we kind of curl up in the chair in the waiting room, and we kind of, act
make ourselves
conspicuous. Small. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. And that's simply changing that posture, even for 2 minutes, 1 minute, go into the bathroom and strike a pose, stretch yourself out
when you're doing that.
Absolutely.
Yes, most definitely. Well, another thing is to do some research on the group you're going to be speaking to. And this could be, if you do simple online research, that's great. But if you know that there's a board of directors or there's an executive team, reach out to some of them and just find out what is awesome about their organization. What areas they might like to improve, and really get some feedback, so it'll help you connect more to the group before you even get in there, so you're not feeling like you're just walking in completely blindfolded.
I think that's really critical, because one of the things that I've been doing in recent months is I've been doing book discussions, and I changed my book discussion based on who my audience is, because everything isn't appropriate for every audience. You really have to what we would call, when I was in divinity school, exegete your audience, because I know that particularly, let's say if I'm doing a sermon, it's very different in some congregations than it is in others. Some congregations might be a little bit more lively, others might sit and stare at me, but I have to know that if they're staring, I don't take it personally. But also what I do is give them permission, you see, because you can have your audience to interact in the way that you want them to, and you can say, you know what, it would really help me out if you give me a little feedback. So if you like something, you can smile, or say amen, or whatever it is. If you're in church, you probably wouldn't say amen if you're somewhere else, but just give me some acknowledgement that what I'm saying, and that way you're already putting it out there too.
Well, engaging, I mean, that's really important, is giving them an opportunity to express. Now, there are different schools of how you do a presentation, and depending on what your goal of the talk is, that will also dictate what you do and how you do it. But there's statistics that say if you go longer than 7 minutes without giving people an opportunity to engage, you could begin to lose them, because it'll be like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. Right. So you want to give them an opportunity to to have a little aha moment as frequently as you can. And in a workshop setting, of course, you'll want people to, to be up and moving around and to engage, with others. So it's really contingent upon what exactly, the outcome is of the talk. That's important as well. Sure. Be really clear on what the outcome is that you want here, and be really clear on what your message is. Why are you there? How are you here to serve these people? So that's important.
One of the things too I was thinking about when we're kind of talking about how do we get beyond the fear, something as simple as breathing is really, really crucial. Because it's so funny when we tell people in therapy to do breathing when they're having a panic attack, or when they're going into an anxious situation, like, that breathing stuff isn't going to work. And we're saying, actually it does, because it really changes your physiological response. So but people, when they're very afraid, you don't even realize that you sort of just freeze, and your breathing either becomes very shallow, or you just really aren't breathing at all.
Or you forget, because some people, you'll see them on stage and they'll be 100 miles an hour, and where typically a woman will speak about 125 words a minute. But I'm sure, I know. So next time you're writing something, and that's if we remember to breathe. If we don't, then it's probably like 200.
I don't know whether you should have said that, because for any men who are watching it, they might be like, see, I knew you guys talk more than we talk, right? So, well, tell us a little bit about your 21-day mindset challenge that you have. What does that involve?
Well, this was an inspiration from above, as many creative endeavors are. And it occurred to me that there are really 7 unconscious things that we bring to the table when it comes time to speak. So I thought, well, you know what? It might be a really good idea if we examine these from 3 different perspectives. So the goal of this is to, during the first week, we take a look at how we think about these things. Because most times people will associate a fear with a thought. Doesn't in my perspective, it doesn't begin there, but that's where most of us are trained to go. So we first go over the thought process behind these 7 different things. And then the second week is how we feel about all of these things. And I'm very tactile. I'm just like completely feeling, and you can get that in the language that I use a lot too. So the second week is all about feeling and the way that we feel about these things that we thought about the week before. And then the third week is how we behave and how we react in accordance to that. So the first thing we take a look at is memory. Now, memory is a powerful tool for, we'll say, good and evil, because we talked about before about going right to the negative before we go to the positive. So this gives people an opportunity to really focus in on good memories. And then we take it a step further in the second week with that, and we connect to how we feel about these memories. So we're taking a positive experience and we are taking it to the next level, to the next level, and the next level. And then when it comes to the week of action, it's like, all right, how do we draw from what we thought and what we felt and turn that into a positive action? And then the second week, and you'll love this one, or the second one is imagination, which, again, we talked about can be used in both extremes. And in so many situations, we so quickly go to the negative aspect, and I'm still guilty of doing that from time to time. It's not my intent, but there is something in the DNA that says there might be a saber-tooth tiger under the bush.
Yes, we go back
Exactly.
to what we know.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost primal.
It is.
So it is an active exercise in, moving through that. And then the third thing we explore is fact, and what we deem as fact, and then why. So a lot of times, well, why do you cut the end off the roast? Well, we've always done it that way. So it's, and that third one, that shakes things up a little bit, because there's so many things that we just take as fact without question, always been that way. And that may in fact not be healthy for us anymore, because what was fact a very, very long time ago may no longer serve us. So there's a lot of opportunity to re-examine and, and to release. But for every place that we dive into where it taps into some of those, ooh, I don't know if I want to go there kinds of moments, then it brings forth more positive things on the other side.
So before you go into what your next 4 are you tackling all 7 of these things each week? So for the first week, you'd be looking at all 7, but you'd be looking at how we think.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Then the next one, one of my all-time favorites, permission. Because everyone reacts differently when you have to ask permission for something. And that runs very, very deep. Some people, when they have to ask, it brings them back to every time they've ever been told no, every time they've ever been denied, every time they felt insignificant or unworthy, where the body, where you were showing before, the body takes on this mind of its own practically when someone goes to ask. And so it explores all of that. And, personally, I'm of the school of, well, ask forgiveness, not permission.
But you see, and I was thinking about that when you said that, because a lot of people will do that, but you're doing it, while it may be okay in some cases, what are you doing to that other person that you haven't asked permission?
Well, it's not applicable across the table.
Yes,
so
I'm thinking some people who are being passive aggressive will say, well, I'm just going to do this. I don't need to ask for permission. But I think that's a very healing sort of thing to do, is to learn that it's okay to ask for permission and to also accept the answer, if the answer is no, and that maybe the no isn't about you, but it's because of something else that's going on.
Well, sometimes people want a no, and the no gets them off the hook. So the no is what they've been going for all the time, but they may just be asking the question as what they would refer to as a courtesy or something, where in reality they had no intent of doing this or going to this place. But this, and that's part of a passive-aggressive behavior as well, is that action of asking that. So then that just kind of frees things up and takes a little bit of a load off. So all of a sudden, oh,
yeah.
well, that was easy.
Yeah. So what about your other three?
Acceptance is the next one. And that plays a huge part into people's level of comfort when it comes to speaking, because acceptance is not only what we accept of ourselves, but it's also what we accept of other people. And the way we approach that is also rooted very deeply. When you take a look at how, what you saw from your grandparents, and your family members, the people that were in your lives and that helped to shape you, that helps to shape how you come to accept yourself. If you have someone who was always in your life saying, oh yes, go, you can do anything you set your mind to, I believe in you, I love you, I support you, then you'll be much more likely to take some risks, because you have that ingrained in you. It's almost, it goes through every cell of your being. It's helping to overwrite that DNA that is that fear, coming from that place of fear. So that acceptance component is huge, and it also helps explore what you accept in others. And there's a lot of schools of thought that say, Al-Anon, for example, that will say, you can't change anyone. All you can do is change yourself. So when you look at acceptance, that can get a little hairy there, because all of a sudden, if you are open to looking at things from that way, from that perspective, then you see, oh, I'm not accepting this because this directly correlates with something in myself.
Yeah.
Am I accepting this because I've been through so much and I've suddenly adopted the mindset of apathy? And am I accepting it because I know I can't change this person? So behind, the underlying component to all of these things is really its intent.
I'm just amazed, though, as I'm listening to you, that's a lot of, you're covering a lot in 21 days. I mean, when I think about this, and I know that you're covering it on a broader level, and that, to me, I think it's also a beginning. So people would come and they do the work they need to do around public speaking, but I'm willing to bet there's some deeper issues that are going on in there that they need to come and see somebody like Susan or myself to really delve into these things a little bit more, because I think that it gets them to a great place. Okay, yay, I've overcome my fear of public speaking. But as you just said before, these things kind of just keep creeping up.
Well, it's like the onion. I mean, there's so many different layers to things. The fear of the speaking, that's the icing on the cake, because there is so much that's underneath that contributes to it, and people don't give a lot of credit to that. They think, oh, well, it's just getting up there and standing and talking.
No, but I love what you're saying, because for me, I hear the psychology of it. It's not just, again, I love Toastmasters. I mean, I know you were an area governor of Toastmaster, and I used to be the president of my Toastmasters chapter in college. So I love it, but it isn't getting to the root of some of this. They're practice techniques that you're given.
Yes.
And so what you're saying that you are doing is you really are tapping into the psychology of why people are. And I think that is one of the things that makes you the confident speaking expert. That's how you differ, is because you're tapping into these things that are very real for people. These are everyday experiences. So it's not just, I'm working just to change the behavior. I'm working to modify the thinking and the feeling and the behavior, and that is super exciting.
Yeah, it's all the unconscious components that are underneath that. There's so many times it takes work, it takes commitment to take a look down there at those different layers, and we've already got busy schedules. We're already being called on and drawn upon from all different kinds of things.
And nobody wants to take a look at that. Let's be real.
I know, and especially if you're telling them, okay, we're going to spend 21 days looking at this stuff. And they're going to, you know, well, okay, so a question is then, why? Why is this so important? I mean, couldn't they just say, you know what? 21 days looking at all this stuff that hurts? No, you know, I just don't need to see it that way. I know. But what I'm saying is, I think often, as soon as someone comes up against something that they don't want to look at, it's like, it wasn't that important for me to, you know, do public speaking anyway, so I'm good.
Well, there's a strong concentration on, you know, focusing on the positive, because if you come out the gate with something that is going to be intimidating and it's going to be difficult, well, okay, granted, a rare few would sign up right away and just say, okay, let me at it, I'm going to give it a go. But that's a great segue into the next component, which is possibility. So there is a very high level of focus on, you know, the positive and what is possible for people. And how we think about possibility is all based on our prior experiences of what maybe we thought was possible and what happened as a result. But, you know, you take some of the most successful people that are out there, Warren Buffett, for example. He says for every 100 things that get brought to him, he says no to 99 of them. Now that's someone that has a very strong focus. So how would you equate that to possibility? Well, possibility is never settling for a no. It's persevering. It's always believing that something is possible, because if there's even the slightest little piece of you that says...
Isn't it like our children? They don't take no too easily, right? Don't they keep asking and asking and asking? You're like, because you just stop asking me. But they don't.
They're invincible.
And then what? So what about your last one? Is
reality, which is also a lot of fun, and it's a little touchy. But with the reality component, it gives you an opportunity to look at what you've constructed as your reality, and if there are components within that that you would like to change, well, what would you like to change? What is your plan for changing that? And a lot of times that's where people get caught up and suddenly decide, oh, well, yeah, you know, I'm a little busy right now. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. But everyone gets to a point, and we've all heard the, you know, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And, you know, we all reach this threshold of discomfort, of pain. A lot of times it happens when we get to our 30s, our 40s, and if it doesn't happen then most certainly it happens when you get to your 50s, where you just say, you know what?
I'm done with this.
Exactly, and all these things that I was focusing on, that, you know, I was resentful of this or that, I was holding on and I just couldn't let go, then all of a sudden it's liberating. Because you realize, you know what, you don't need to own this stuff. And we think we need to own so much.
We do, we do. So let me ask you about your program, though.
Sure.
Is it an individual program? Is it group work that you're doing?
Well, it depends on how a person feels most comfortable. So it can be offered when people do decide to work with me and go through the Confident Speaker series, which the 21-day Mindset Challenge is a segue into. They have the flexibility of doing that. So they could have a VIP, like one-to-one experience where they'll be hand-holding, taking them through this 5-segment program, because a lot of times people prefer individual attention. Then they like to be able to know that, all right, I'm stuck here in this particular part. How can you help me specifically and directly? So there is a one-on-one component to it. There's also a group component where people can do it in a group as well. And there's, you know, it's a virtual program, so there's 5 different components that you would get. There's Q&A that goes along with that. And there's also an option if someone wanted to do it by way of self-study. In my feeling, that's the least effective way to go about doing it. Because it leaves you to your own vices in terms of how quickly you progress. And ultimately, when you dive right into something and you make a commitment, that is when you have the most success. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, when you've seen people and over the course of a year, you're not seeing a lot of progress. It's like, how committed are they to the process?
It's like we give them homework and the next week they come in, oh, I didn't do my homework. we can only help you as much as you will allow us to help you.
Help me you!
But what another thing I value about your program is because if you're really talking about being an expert, you're taking them through a long period of time. You're not just saying you're going to be an expert in a week. No, you know, you have your 21-day mindset, and then you go into your 5-week series. Now, it's not to say that they couldn't benefit from doing the 21-day mindset.
Oh, they would.
Some people might even just need a brush up. But in order for you to become an expert at anything, you have to practice, 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 practice. And you didn't become an expert overnight. And you know, we both know in organizations like Toastmasters, you have all those series of speeches that you have to go through, and then you have competitions that you have to go through. I mean, all of this. And so what I like about what you're doing is you're saying, okay, let's come get down to business and deal with the stuff that we have to deal with that gets in the way of that. And then, yes, we'll look at some of the techniques too. I mean, not that you talked about that, but I'm assuming that there are some techniques that
there are.
Now, what I found myself thinking about when you were talking, I was thinking about the person who isn't necessarily afraid to speak, but they get up there and you cringe for them. There are people that I have heard, and I love them to death, but I'm sitting in my seat and I'm cringing for them, and they're just seemingly oblivious to the fact that it's uncomfortable hearing them speak. So what do you suggest for people like that? And you know, well, I don't know. What are your words?
Well, the first thing that the thing that you'd mentioned was that they aren't even aware. So if they're oblivious to it, then you hold space for them to do well.
Accept them as they are.
Accept them as they are. But I was at an event where a woman had an opportunity to stand up and speak about, you know, her book and her program for 10 minutes, and this woman went across the stage like this. It was exhausting, absolutely exhausting to watch her. She couldn't stand still. And afterward, I had gone up and asked her. This was in the parking lot. I had asked her how she felt giving her talk. And she said, I felt amazing. I think that was the best talk I ever gave. So it's that awareness where people just don't know. And a lot of times people won't admit they understand there's an energetic component. So they just, you know, they're people.
So I just have to know, wait a minute.
Here.
What did you do? Did you tell her? Did you give her some feedback?
Well, yeah, no, I did. I had said, well, I said I was curious because I felt a little anxious watching you speak. So it must have been something that you said to me tapped into something deeper within myself that created that feeling of anxiety.
Well, but if you said it to her like that, though, she could still think it wasn't. Yes, it could have been something that she said, but it could have also been just the movement, and so she still didn't hear.
No, and well, what you'll find is that a lot of times people won't hear it. They have to experience it. And some people have these nerves that just won't quit, and you practically have to nail their feet to the floor. The thought of standing in one place and talking and then moving deliberately at a point, and then maybe 4 feet away or 6 feet, however big the stage is, and then staying there, nail the feet to the floor, and then be deliberate in your movement. That's a technique that comes much farther down the road. So there's, you know, there's this building of skills to be able to get to that point where, you know, it's a complete level of relaxation. So everything that I do works at the very core of things and works at that feeling component of it. Toastmasters is amazing,
right?
Granted,
right.
And that's
yes, we don't take anything away.
No, I loved it. I loved it.
But in our remaining time, because the time just really goes by really quickly, just a couple other quick things.
Sure.
Could you at least give us maybe just 3 techniques for public speaking, or maybe some do's and don'ts, just some things for our audience to take away.
Okay, a don't, and I'm going to give you more do's than don'ts, just
Okay.
because, you know, folks
And really
accentuate the
quickly,
positive.
really quickly.
Okay, so don't eat or drink 90 minutes before you get on stage, and stay away from, water's okay, but stay away from the caffeine. And don't make it all about yourself. The focus needs to be on the audience. The do's, do some research in advance so that you know the group that you're speaking to as much as you can about them. Do smile, very important. Do fully embody having a heart of service. You are there to serve. And sneak away if you can, do your little power pose there, and do firmly believe with every ounce of your being that you deserve to be there. Psych yourself out in a good way.
Well, Leslie, there's so many other questions I could have asked you, and
we could have been here for hours.
Yes. Because this really is an important topic. But we do have to go. We have to wrap up our time. If you'd like to know more about Leslie Karen Hammond, go to www.confidentspeakersseries.com. Speakerseries.com.
Correct.
Her information has been up on. As she's gone through the show today, you've seen her information there. If you'd like to know more about us at Sacred Intelligence, please email us at info@sacredintelligence.com or go to our website, sacredintelligence.com. Again, thank you, Leslie, for being with us today. We so enjoyed you. And we look forward to learning more about your series as well. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, have a good week. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.